Okay, just as I was saying in the last video how great this car is running, Mac has his carburetor completely taken apart. The issue I'm having is clogged idle jets. I'm getting a lot of debris in the carburetor and I'm not 100% sure why. I think the contamination is not coming from the fuel supply or the tank. You know, I've already completely cleaned my tank and gone through a bunch of effort on that fuel system, along with a 10 micron carburetor fuel filter. The problem is air is getting contaminated or the fuel is getting contaminated from the air cleaner. So if we look down inside the carburetor bowl, most of the fuel is evaporated. I took a lot of it out. But you can see at the low points there is some debris down in there. It looks like dust to me, looks like dirt down there, but the bottom of the fuel bowl is very dirty. And these are the air bleeds right here. That's where the air goes in for the idle jet, and it's really easy to get this hole clogged up. That's the air bleed, and then the idle jet's even smaller, and they go down here on the side. This is the idle jet holder right here. There's the air bleed and the idle jet, so these are very easy to clog. I think these are the problem. This is the air cleaner for the passenger side. It's got this breather vent that goes to the crankcase. But anyways, the chrome filters are, you know, of course they're not the original, and they are a little bit flimsy. It has this cast aluminum base plate, which this part's okay, and then there's a big thick cork gasket, and for all I know, the gasket is just deteriorating and getting inside the float bowls. But then this sits on top like this, and once you compress it down with the lock nut on top, you can actually see daylight underneath. And to make it even worse, there's no gasket between this and the top of the carburetor. So I've put the nut on here like it is on the car. And I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this in the camera, but there's a little bit of daylight between the chrome and this cork gasket. So either the gasket's too old or it's just not a good design. So I think this is the problem, not the fuel filter. And the question is, you know, what do you do to fix it? Well, I don't have the original air cleaners, and even if I did, they won't fit the Webers because Weber never came on Porsche engines, at least the 912 and 356 ones. I think they came in some earlier engines, and they came in 911 engines, but there are no air cleaners that fit Weber 40 IDFs. There are some air cleaners that are available for the VW crowd aftermarket, and they're better quality. They're either cast or billet aluminum, and that works okay, except for you still need the breather, or you might get oil leaks at the pulley, and you also have to spend, I think it's like 120 bucks. So that's one way to do it. I think I'm going to just, you know, make a new gasket here on the bottom and replace this cork gasket with something a little better and make sure this clamps down without leaking. I think if I can just get the base figured out, I think the top and all the seals around here are fine. The element itself, you know, it's got oil on it, but the element has a nice rubber interface all the way around it. And I believe when you clamp it together, this flange will create a nice seal on the actual element. It's really just the base that's the problem. The solution I came up with is to replace this cork gasket, which is deteriorating, with like this nylon spacer. This is a nylon spacer. It's just, I just traced this thing on my scanner, and then I put it into my computer to CNC machine it on the CNC router. So this fits on here nice. It's got the holes and everything. And then on top of that is going to go a gasket, and this was cut out on the laser. So these all fit nicely together. So now when it clamps together, and there are some velocity stacks that go here. So this is one of the velocity stacks. So there's gonna be, you know, these 4 bolts that clamp it together, plus I'm gonna put 2 more right here where this bridge clamps the top down, because that was what was bending it up. So I want to secure this from here. And so I'll put 2 more locations where it cinches this down. That way there it gets a good seal all the way around the perimeter, and I don't expect it's gonna leak. This gasket's like a 1/16 of an inch, and so you can compress that a little bit. And I think it'll take up most of the daylight as you look through here. I think it'll take that up. I got everything prepped and drilled, so now I'm just going to assemble, but I'm going to assemble with a little bit of red rubber grease because the grease will help collect any dirt that might try to get through these seals or gaskets. Just going to put a kind of a thin coating on this. Okay, one of the things I mentioned previously before is that the vents for the idle circuit, the air bleeds for the idle circuit, just lay right on top of the carburetor. So anything that gets either underneath the air filter housing or is circulating even with inside the actual air filter element, gravity is just going to bring it down to the bottom and it's going to get sucked in through the idle jet. So another trick to do is to increase the height of the vent so that any circulating dust is not likely to go inside the snorkel. It's like a little snorkel that pops up. So I'm going to be putting in some little air bleed snorkels so that it doesn't just ingest dust right there at the bottom of the, or at the top of the carburetor. That's kind of a bad design on the Weber 40 IDFs, but there is a quick fix and it's not that hard to do. Here's the carb top that I completely removed from the car, just disconnected the fuel line there. And this is the part that's very dirty, especially in this corner. It's just got a lot of stuff. This is all underneath the air filter, never should have been dirty. You can see it's not rust or anything. It's basically just, I think, just dust and dirt. And remember, this was clean about 1,000 miles ago, or maybe slightly less than 1,000 miles. And that's how dirty this has become. So definitely having an issue with the air filter, I think, for sure. It's easier for me to clean. I'm just gonna go ahead and take the float off and take the gasket off. Make sure it's all clean underneath the gasket as well. I'll leave that attached. You can also see on the bottom of this, the float even has some debris on it. So we'll make sure we get the float nice and clean as well. It's just real dirty inside. This gasket here will come off. And then even more signs of dirt here underneath the gasket. Now I really should replace that gasket. I haven't ordered a new one yet. Probably just reuse that one, but we'll definitely make sure it gets cleaned up. These are the two regions that feed the idle circuit. So essentially whatever air goes into the main bowls here, and then the two spots where air comes into the idle circuits are these two passages right here. And that's the part that is the most dirty. If you can see all the dirt collected around there, air is being sucked into this hole when it's idling, and that's just a huge concatenation of dirt right there. So I'm gonna get some carb spray, just start cleaning that off because that's really dirty. This is probably the one that's been clogged. You see how dirty, you can get an idea how dirty that is. It's just really bad. Yeah, this thing is now very clean. Just went over it with some Q-tips and the carb cleaner and just making sure all these cavities are clean, especially here in the corner of the idle jet. Okay, these little stacks here are really not my idea. This is what a lot of the sand car guys do, the dune buggy guys do, to cure a known problem with these Webers. These are typically called jet doctors. You can buy them, and they're a little bit more fancy than I use. Just use some brass tubing. But you can use the jet doctor's got some machine surfaces on it with some shoulders so you don't push them in too far. I just put a little bit of Loctite on there, and it's enough of a press fit with the drill bit that I used. I got 2/1000 interference press fit. So with the float off, it's pretty easy to install just a tube. This does not restrict the airflow to the idle jet. This is probably 20 times the diameter of the idle jet bleed. So even though this is 1 inch long, it's really not going to affect the airflow to a significant degree. At least I hope not. This is a 5/32 outside diameter tube, and I just had to drill the hole slightly bigger in the aluminum. And like I said before, that just prevents air being sucked in from the base of the carburetor, and it's now sucked in from a much higher spot. All right, here is the final kind of stack up, even using the carb top to show all the different layers here. So it's the carb top, there's a gasket, there's the carb filter base, which is the cast aluminum. Then there's this nylon spacer, then there's another gasket, and then it's this tray here. And then those get sandwiched by these velocity stacks. So these velocity stacks are on some studs. The other studs go from that way. And that's really the overall stack up. I don't know that it's really better than a billet aluminum one or a cast aluminum one, although this one is pretty light. It's a pretty light top, so I mean, that's helpful. And then the other modification that I talked about were these snorkels. You see these little brass guys here, and that's what takes the air from this kind of clean area, which I hope is clean. The air goes through the filter element and it goes right down these snorkels into what would be down here is this passage here. That's where it goes into the actual carb body. So rather than picking up dirt at the bottom of the carburetor, it's supposed to pick up clean air from the top of that snorkel. That's the idea. I hope it works better. I think the real issue was the gaskets were leaking, and there was a lack of gaskets. But this combo should actually do the trick. This brass tubing was literally like $3 or $4, and the gasket material is probably $10 at the most, and I have left over. So this to me was a good DIY solution. Now I'm just reassembling the float, make sure this needle's clean. How you like that tiny little hammer? Super tiny. Some of you eagle-eyed guys probably realized I forgot the gasket. And for some reason, you cannot put the Weber gasket on with the float installed. That seems kind of crazy to me, but whatever, we got to redo it. Now it's ready to go back on. Everything's now put back together, so it's time to start it up, see how it idles. I got my bumper just hanging on here. Taking that off to paint it, so probably should secure that. Just want to make sure there's no fuel leaks. Nope. I'd love to take it for a ride, but I have removed my striker piece here to have it plated. There's a spacer plate that I forgot to get plated, so that's why that's off right now, and I can't really keep the door closed. Time will tell if that fix actually solves the problem. I did two things. One was pad up the gasketing and shore up all that loose tin so that the air cleaner can actually do its thing. And I also added those snorkels to the idle jet circuit. Hopefully that'll take care of any more plugged idle jets. I don't like it when the engine doesn't idle consistently. So that was an issue, and I hope it works well. It was a good diversion. I need to get the bumpers done so I can get back to driving this thing. Ask me how my sanding's going.